Here's something fun to think about. So I watched a clip of Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was taking questions at a panel. It was a stage discussion with some of the professionals, and a kid asked, "What happens if two black holes eat each other?" Right? Basically, it was very, very interesting because apparently there was a thesis that was written on it that used Einstein's theory of relativity to calculate the effect on time and space around two black holes that are sharing space between them that is also warped, because the space around it is already warped. So as you approach the event horizon in a black hole, near a black hole, time dilates and the passage of time slows exponentially, such that you could never truly reach the event horizon as an individual and know it, because what an inch could take you billions and billions of years, and who knows what happens by then. But the passage of time reaching it would seem normal to the person being sucked in, assuming they're still alive. If they could experience it, they wouldn't notice a difference, but they would see everything beyond them. If they were able to look behind them and see anything that from where they came, it would all be in hyperspeed because they would be slowing down. And I guess technically there would be a point where you would finally reach zero, right? Where you hit the event horizon, and then what? But what was interesting about it is, apparently the swirl that is created is like a figure eight. And this is really interesting to think about as just symbology is concerned with human history. If you were to enter the dilation field of one black hole and swirl around both of them in that figure eight that they create when they're sucking each other in and they're pulling at things before their event horizons collide, you could actually, the point where you started, right? The point where you started, where you entered the dilation field, by the time you traveled all the way around both, doing that figure eight around both of the black holes, you would actually end up in the past when you first got there, because of how they warp space and time. You would actually travel in the past. So you get there, it's like arriving at the racetrack, and by the time you finish your lap, however many laps, you only just arrive. You cross the finish line, and then as soon as you cross the finish line, you just snap back to this. You just started the race. The question then becomes a lot of things do you just keep repeating the same pattern of time? Because now that you've gone back, it's theoretically, I think as long as the conditions remain the same, you should continue being pulled around. And do the black holes, are they affected themselves in such a way that they could never possibly collide because the time around them continues to repeat, right? The time-space around them continues to function on a loop. Would that prevent them from being able to actually collide? Would that prevent them from being able to go anywhere? They couldn't pull away at that point. They'd be locked in. And anything that gets caught in its grasp would be in an infinite loop forever. And it comes to an interesting question. So the principle there that you could actually travel back in time, in that instance, relies upon the traveler returning to a previous state at a previous time. Now, whether that includes aging or not, I imagine it probably would. But you end up where you were, repeating the action that you were in the past, right? So if you were able to harness that principle, I thought it was really interesting. If you were able to harness that principle to travel into the past, then there's a couple of things that come to mind. This is just my conjecture where it comes in, and I think it's really cool to think about. So first, assume for a moment that in order to travel back in time, you need to re-inhabit yourself, right? You can only exist in a time where you exist, right? Because you need to be able to repeat history that you've actually experienced in order for space-time to be able to place you anywhere, which that idea, I think, lends itself to some kind of a soul, or whatever you want to call it, by, for lack of a better term. That's what we call a soul, is a unique identifier that every individual thing or living thing, it's like a unique signature that nobody else can occupy, only you can. So if it's possible to use that principle to pass back in time, then, but you had to re-inhabit yourself at that time, right? And let's say it aged you in reverse, because I think that's the only thing that makes sense, right? That your body would be affected the same way and would also reverse. Would you even know by the time you got there? Because your memories, right? In all sense of honesty, your thoughts are chemicals, right? Your brain stores memories as data. It's organically written, right? But it's all chemicals. So I guess if you could reproduce your brain, if you were able to take the exact composition down to the atomic level of every single micrometer or whatever unit of measurement, I guess if you could duplicate every single atom in your brain in its exact configuration as it is in any particular moment, then would that brain not have those exact same thoughts from that exact time that it was copied, right? And such that imagine if you could take, this is a different idea, but if you could take someone who's like losing their mind and you could reverse the effects of it by restoring an old backup that is built organically from the ground up to be a perfect copy, and somehow still functions because it's like attached to everything it needs to survive, etc. Right? That all your experiences can be wired in from an atomic level because that's how they're configured. That's like your experiences create a unique configuration that only you have. So if you were to travel back in time, then would you even know that you traveled back in time, right? And the presumption, I think, is that you wouldn't, because you would forget everything, as you would, your brain would basically deconfigure itself or reconfigure itself in reverse. So you would unlearn all the experiences you had as you go back in time. So if it was possible to use that principle to go back into your past, would you even know that you went back into your past? And for instance, let's say if you died and became a celestial being, if that's what happened to people, right, or just you in particular, and billions of years later, two black holes get close to each other and cause this phenomenon, and you as this being that can travel among the stars gets caught in it, right, intentionally or otherwise, could you use that to travel back billions of years and inhabit your signature from that time, assuming that signature, you as a collection of atoms or whatever have changed over time and become all these different things? And if you did, wouldn't the rest of the universe have to change with you, right? How much space and time would have to be affected in order for that to be possible? And then, if you're capable of traveling into the past based on this theory, right? Is that not deterministic? Is fatalism not the correct understanding of the passage of time, and that free will is actually a farce, that we don't have any free will whatsoever, and what we believe to be free will is completely made up? Because in order for you to be able to travel back into your past, you need to be able to travel back in time in the future of that past. Otherwise, the past can no longer exist, right? So you travel billions of years in the future, you travel billions of years back, and you don't remember any of it, right? Because if you did, it would change something. And then you repeat that billions of years on a playback loop, and you have to keep repeating that playback loop. And that playback loop has to be exact, such that the conditions do not change. The question is, how much, is there anything that wouldn't be affected by it? I don't think there is. I think it would probably affect everything, and if it did, that would make you the center of the universe, because quite literally the universe is now stuck on a loop because of you, and it's centered around you and your actions. And if you were somehow removed from it, if someone was able to insert themselves somewhere in there, get caught in a feedback loop and change it, then they could change history forever, and you'd never be able to come back. Not that you would know. That's part of the problem too, is that it's totally arbitrary. If you can travel into the past but you can't remember any of it, then we could have done what we're doing 700 trillion times as an entire historical collective experience. Human beings could have been repeating the same thing for an infinite number of times, an uncountable, I should say, number of times, without realizing it. And then the moment it changes would still be what we believe to be our one and only existence, even though we've been repeating it. And it wouldn't matter that we were repeating it, but it would be a salvation from the tyranny of fatalistic reality and into the actual into a return to freedom. That the moment somebody, like the first time around, right, the first time from a billion years ago until just before you traveled back into the past, the first run of that section of time, like before it, is free will. But the moment you lock it in, it is no longer free will. It was the first time, and it never can be any further, because it's now it's predetermined. It's like you recorded it live. Now the rest of it's just a recording, and you're just going through the recording over and over and over again, until, if possible, something changes it. And once something changes that, then from that moment that it changes, free will is restored. And then, of course, again, right, to what end? What does that actually affect? Who does that actually benefit? Does anybody know? Can you know the benefits? Is it possible for you to know? Just as, is it possible for you to know if you've been repeating your life as part of a playback loop for trillions of times, or however many? Could you possibly know that you've been living this the same way? And the answer, I think, is no. You couldn't know. And the same thoughts that you have about how you might know, just like the conversation I'm having now, would be constant. That would never change, because it cannot change in order for the loop to remain intact. In order for the event where a person travels back in time to happen, the only way for that to stay intact is if they are incapable of two things. One, they're incapable of remembering anything. They're incapable of knowing what has happened to them or what they've done in the future. And two, no changes can occur. Period. That's it's kind of scary to think about.